The Dominion's empire had stood for centuries, its towering spires reaching toward the stars like the fingers of gods. But even the greatest empires fall. Beneath the gleaming monuments of its capital world, whispers of rebellion stirred in the shadows, and the fall of the Dominion would come not with a roar, but with a silent judgment that would echo through the cosmos. Dark clouds churned above the metropolitan sprawl of Dominion Prime, the once untouchable heart of an empire that had ruled 1,000 worlds. The grand boulevards, once filled with triumphant parades celebrating conquest after conquest, now hosted nervous security patrols and hushed conversations behind closed doors. The colossal fortresses that ringed the city stood like silent sentinels, their weapons still trained on the stars, but their operators glanced nervously at their own shadows. Admiral Kex'tar stood at the observation deck of the Central Command spire, his weathered hands clasped behind his back as he surveyed the city below. The reports from the outer sectors grew more troubling by the day. Entire fleets had gone silent, supply convoys disappeared without trace, and commanders who had served the Dominion for decades were found dead in their quarters with no signs of struggle. The humans had returned, yes, but this felt different. This felt like something eating the Empire from within. "Sir," came a voice from behind him. Commander Velo SS approached with the cautious gait of a man delivering unwelcome news. "The Security Council meeting has been moved to the secure bunker. Another attempt was made on Minister Korthen's life this morning." Kex'tar didn't turn from the window. "How many does that make this week?" 7 attempts, sir. 3 successful." The Admiral's reflection in the armored glass showed no emotion, but his jaw tightened imperceptibly. "And still no trace of the perpetrators?" "None, sir. They strike like phantoms and vanish without leaving so much as an energy signature." Velo SS hesitated. "Some of the commanders are beginning to whisper about ghosts, sir. About the dead seeking vengeance." Now Kex'tar did turn, his scarred face bearing the weight of 1,000 battles. "The dead don't pilot ships or sabotage communication arrays, Commander. This is the work of very much alive enemies." He moved toward the door, his cape billowing behind him. "Enemies who know us far too well." 3 levels below, in a maintenance shaft that didn't appear on any official blueprints, Agent Thane of the Silent Judgment adjusted his listening device and smiled coldly. Every word, every nervous glance, every betrayal of weakness, all of it flowed back to his handlers like poison through the Empire's veins. The Dominion had built its power on fear and subjugation, never realizing that the very systems they used to control others could be turned against them. The Silent Judgment had been born from the Empire's own shadows, former intelligence operatives, disillusioned military officers, and civilian leaders who had watched too many worlds burn in the name of Dominion glory. They weren't revolutionaries seeking to replace one tyrant with another. They were surgeons, carefully excising the cancer of the Empire with precision strikes that left no trace, no evidence, no way to fight back against an enemy that didn't exist in any official capacity. Thane spoke into his communicator, his voice barely a whisper. "Phase 1 is complete. The leadership is paranoid and isolated. Begin Phase 2, target the supply networks." Across the galaxy, similar conversations took place in 100 different locations. In the depths of military starships, trusted crew members quietly disabled critical systems before their next engagement with human forces. In the bustling trade centers of core worlds, cargo manifests were altered to send essential supplies to the wrong destinations. In the very halls of power on Dominion Prime, loyal servants of the Empire for decades suddenly found their allegiances shifting like sand in a storm. The walls that held the Dominion together were beginning to crack. Old allies turned enemies. Former leaders now plotted against their own empire. Power was shifting, but no one knew yet who would stand victorious, or if victory itself had any meaning when the very foundation of order was crumbling. Admiral Kex'tar descended into the secure bunker, past layers of energy shields and scan-resistant barriers, into a chamber that had been designed to withstand the destruction of the planet above. Around the holographic display table sat the remnants of the Dominion's leadership, pale, nervous figures who jumped at shadows and spoke in hushed tones of threats they couldn't name or quantify. The human fleet has advanced 3 more sectors, reported General Zephyr, her usually commanding voice reduced to a worried whisper. But that's not our primary concern anymore. 6 of my division commanders have been found dead in the past week, and another 3 have simply vanished. Same with the civilian administration, added Governor Malketh, his tentacles writhing with anxiety. Key officials throughout the Empire are disappearing or dying under mysterious circumstances. Our entire command structure is collapsing, and we don't even know who's attacking us. Minister Yaktor, the Empire's chief intelligence officer, leaned forward with haunted eyes. We've analyzed every pattern, every method, every possible connection. Whoever is doing this knows our security protocols better than we do. They move through our most secure facilities like they belong there. They know our schedules, our habits, our weaknesses. He paused, the words seeming to catch in his throat. I believe we're dealing with our own people. The silence that followed was deafening. The idea that the Dominion could be betrayed from within, that their own trusted servants could turn against them, was more terrifying than any external enemy. Kex'tar's voice cut through the tension like a blade. Then we adapt. If they know our protocols, we change them. If they know our people, we replace them. The Dominion has survived for centuries because we do what is necessary. But even as he spoke the words, Kex'tar felt their hollowness. How do you fight an enemy that doesn't exist? How do you defend against attacks that leave no evidence? How do you trust anyone when betrayal could come from your closest advisors? The silent judgment moved like ghosts, unseen but powerful. They did not fight in open war. They fought in the shadows, in the whispers of betrayal, in the silent strikes that tore the heart from the Dominion without them ever knowing. Every loyal servant who turned, every communication that went astray, every supply shipment that never arrived, all part of a greater tapestry of destruction being woven with threads too fine to see. Far from Dominion Prime, Commander Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution, studying the tactical display with growing amazement. The Dominion fleets that had once moved with clockwork precision now seemed to stumble over themselves. Supply lines were in chaos, command structures were failing, and their enemies appeared to be fighting each other as much as they were fighting humanity. Admiral, reported her tactical officer, were receiving surrender signals from the Dominion garrison in the Kepler sector. They're requesting terms. Sarah frowned. Surrender? We haven't even engaged them yet. No ma'am. According to their transmission, their commanding officer was found dead this morning, and half their supply depot was destroyed in what they're calling a maintenance accident. They don't have the resources to fight. This was the 12th such surrender in as many days. Entire Dominion strongholds were collapsing without a shot being fired, their defenders either dead, missing, or simply abandoning their posts. It was as if some invisible force was clearing the path ahead of the human fleet, eliminating obstacles before they could even become problems. Ma'am, her communications officer called out, we're receiving a transmission on a secure channel. Source unknown. Sarah nodded grimly. Put it through. The voice that emerged from the speakers was calm, professional, and completely unidentifiable. Commander Chen, you are approaching the Zirian system. The Dominion fleet there will be unable to respond to your advance due to technical difficulties. We recommend you proceed with your original timetable. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Ghost signals, muttered her first officer. We've been getting them for weeks. Someone out there is helping us, but we don't know who or why. Sarah stared at the display, watching as another Dominion stronghold went dark. Maybe we don't need to know. Maybe we just need to be grateful that someone else wants to see the Dominion fall as much as we do. But even as she spoke, a chill ran down her spine. If this mysterious ally could cripple the Dominion so effectively, what would happen when there was no more Dominion to fight? What would this silent judgment turn its attention to next? The turning point came not with a single decisive battle, but with a cascade of failures that swept across the Empire like a plague. Communication networks failed simultaneously across 17 sectors, leaving Dominion fleets blind and unable to coordinate their defenses. Supply depots that had operated flawlessly for decades suddenly reported critical shortages of everything from fuel to ammunition. Most devastating of all, the great orbital defense platforms that protected the core world simply went offline, their control systems corrupted by viruses that seemed to anticipate every countermeasure. Admiral Kex'tar found himself commanding an empire that existed more in name than in reality. His orders took days to reach their destinations, assuming they arrived at all. His fleets fought independently, without coordination or support, against an enemy that seemed to know their every move before they made it. Standing in his command center as reports of disaster after disaster flooded in, Kex'tar realized that the Dominion's grip on the galaxy was not just slipping, it had already fallen. Every battle they fought, every move they made, only brought them closer to their inevitable demise. And in the shadows, the silent judgment whispered victory with voices that sounded disturbingly familiar. "Sir," Commander Velo SS approached with another message tablet, his movements those of a man walking to his own execution. "General Thekvor has been found dead in his quarters. That makes 12 senior officers this week." Kex'tar took the tablet without looking at it. He had stopped reading the death reports days ago, they all told the same story. Loyal servants of the Empire, found dead with no signs of struggle, no evidence of foul play, no clues about their killers. It was as if the Dominion itself was consuming its own people. "Commander," Kex'tar said quietly, "do you remember why we started this empire?" Velo SS was clearly caught off guard by the question. "Sir. Centuries ago, when the first ships bearing the Dominion banner left our homeworld, what did we tell ourselves we were doing? What noble purpose did we claim? We said we were bringing order to chaos. Uniting the galaxy under one banner, ending the wars between species, creating peace through strength." Kex'tar laughed bitterly. Peace through strength. Unity through conquest. Order through oppression. He turned to face his subordinate, and Velo SS was shocked to see tears in the Admiral's eyes. "Look around you, Commander. Look at what we built. Is this the peace we promised? Is this the order we sought to create?" Before Velo SS could answer, alarms began blaring throughout the command center. Display screens flickered to life showing human ships dropping out of hyperspace around Dominion Prime itself. Sarah Chen's fleet had somehow bypassed every defense, every early warning system, every obstacle that should have protected the Empire's heart. "How?" Velo SS gasped. "How did they get through?" Kex'tar studied the tactical display with the calm of a man who had already accepted his fate. "Because someone let them through. Someone who knows our defenses better than we do. Someone who decided that the Dominion needed to fall." As if summoned by his words, a new voice spoke from the command center speakers, calm, familiar, and utterly without emotion. "Admiral Kex'tar," the voice said, and Kex'tar felt his blood turn to ice as he recognized it. "This is Commander Thane, formerly of Dominion Intelligence, currently of the Silent Judgment. You have 60 minutes to order a complete surrender of all Dominion forces, or we will proceed with the final phase of our operation." "Thane," Kex'tar whispered. "You've been dead for 2 years. I attended your funeral." "You attended the funeral of the man who served the Dominion," came the reply. "That man died when he watched you order the glassing of Meridian Colony because they requested representation in the Senate. The man speaking to you now serves justice." Around the command center, officers who had served together for decades looked at each other with suspicious eyes. If Thane had been able to fake his death and work against them for years, who else might be a traitor? Who else might be part of this silent judgment? "You want to know how we knew everything, Admiral?" Thane's voice continued. "How we anticipated your every move, penetrated your every defense. Because we were there when you made those decisions. We were the ones who carried out your orders. We were your most trusted servants, and you turned us into your most dedicated enemies." Kex'tar had led his fleet to victory time and time again, crushing rebellions and conquering worlds in the name of Dominion glory. But now, he stood at a crossroads, torn between loyalty to an empire that had lost its way and the growing certainty that the galaxy would be better off without it. Betrayal was no longer a matter of choice, it was the only path forward. "Signal all remaining Dominion forces," he said quietly. "Full surrender. Stand down all weapons and prepare for humanitarian assistance." "Sir." Vel OSS looked at him in shock. "You can't be serious." Kex'tar removed his admiral's insignia and placed them on the command console. "The Dominion is already dead, Commander. We're just finally admitting it." The final battle, when it came, was less a fight than a funeral. Sarah Chen's human fleet moved through the system unopposed, their weapons silent as Dominion ships powered down their shields and transmitted surrender codes. On the surface of Dominion Prime, the great defensive installations that had never known defeat simply opened their blast doors and waited for occupying forces to arrive. The silent judgment emerged from the shadows at last, revealing themselves to be a network of former Dominion officials, military officers, and intelligence operatives who had become sickened by the empire they had once served. They had spent years carefully dismantling the very system they had helped to build, turning the Dominion's own strength against itself with surgical precision. Sarah Chen found herself meeting with Admiral Kex'tar in the very chamber where he had once planned the conquest of human space. The proud warrior who had terrorized a dozen species now looked tired, defeated, but strangely peaceful. "You could have fought," Sarah said. "Your remaining forces, even weakened, could have made us pay dearly for this victory." Kex'tar nodded slowly. "Yes. And millions more would have died so that I could delay the inevitable by a few months. Tell me, Commander, what's the point of winning a war if you become something that doesn't deserve to survive?" Through the great windows of the command center, they could see the city below beginning to come alive again. Citizens who had lived in fear for so long were emerging into the streets, not to celebrate conquest, but to witness the end of an age and the uncertain dawn of whatever would come next. The Dominion, once a shining beacon of power that had dominated the galaxy for centuries, now lay in ruins. Its leaders were gone, its military shattered, its very ideology exposed as the hollow tyranny it had always been. But even in its ashes, a new dawn began to rise. The galaxy was free, at least for now. In the days that followed, as transition governments formed and occupied worlds began the long process of healing, the members of the Silent Judgment quietly dispersed. They had accomplished their goal, but they knew that their work was far from over. Freedom was not a destination but a journey, and that journey would require constant vigilance against those who would seek to replace one tyranny with another. Thane stood in the ruins of the Central Command Spire, looking out over a city that was slowly learning to breathe again. The Dominion was dead, but the forces that had created it, fear, hatred, the desire to control others, those would never truly die. They would simply find new forms, new champions, new justifications. The Silent Judgment would be watching. Waiting. Ready to act when the next empire grew too proud, too cruel, too certain of its own righteousness. Because the price of freedom was eternal vigilance, and some judgments could only be delivered in silence. The fall of the Dominion would be remembered as the day when tyranny finally met its match, not in the form of a conquering army, but in the quiet determination of those who refused to let injustice stand. The galaxy had learned that even the mightiest empire could be brought low by the simple act of good people deciding that they would no longer serve evil. And in the end, that was perhaps the most important lesson of all.